Hey, what's going on, everyone? Jason from Clocked It here. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. I'm probably going to ramble on for longer than I should, and I'm sure it's going to be a heavily edited video as I pause to think about what I'm going to say and cut out lots of things. But I'm just going to go with the flow and see how I go. But it's been a wild generation when it comes to the Nintendo Switch. Right? Right at the start, even before the damn thing launched, and as soon as the NX name appeared, people wanted the next Nintendo console to be, let's say, at least as powerful as the PlayStation 4. That was a general vibe. This was understandable, given the commercial failure of the Wii U, to get the bulk of the major third parties on board, software-wise and for software parity. The Wii U didn't quite have that unique nature of the Wii, with the Wiimote Nunchuck, which got many exclusives for the from third parties, for the Wii. The Switch got revealed, and many people called this doom instantly, based off the recent failure of the Wii U, and even based off the games being shown from for the upcoming Switch. It was evident that the Switch in its new hybrid form wasn't going to be leaps and bounds beyond what the Wii U offered, and this upset many from the start. Kind of in the same way that the Nintendo Wii from the GameCube upset many people from the start, but like I said, the Nintendo Wii had that Wiimote originality that in itself got people excited. As time has progressed with the Switch, we've seen a great number of titles released for the system, with many third-party games that once appeared on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One appearing on the console, and in many cases doing an impressive job for this little hybrid system. Yet the cracks were always evident for some, and regardless of how impressive these games looked for this hardware, it was never going to be enough for many. The years have rolled on. The Switch continuously breaking sales records in both hardware and software, literally putting Microsoft and Sony's sales to shame. Especially in the software sales. Regardless of what side of the fence you sit on. And we roll up to today, where the Switch is still selling in great numbers, and for its key software releases like Splatoon 3 and Pokemon Violet and Scarlet, regardless of personal opinions on those games, these are breaking sales records like virtually no other publisher can even think about matching, especially even more so in Japan. Yeah, as we see now that the trumpet is being blown by many that Nintendo now need to move on in 2023, because the Switch is supposedly technically on its deathbed, and in order to continue getting the big third-party games that seemingly make all the difference to a console's success and appeal across the masses, it's time for Nintendo to provide the Switch's successor. That's what people are calling for. A successor which, let me point out, most big influencers, websites, YouTubers, etc., have all been pushing for since arguably 2017 when the Switch came out. In their never-ending agenda against Nintendo and their hardware decisions. And what's the main reason for this? If they're going to be honest and we're going to be honest, I feel the main reason is graphics. Sure, now performance comes in, but that's something that these same people like to ignore for the most part, even when it comes to their favorite big publishers releasing their AAA already declared Game of the Year, sometimes questionable performing games on their platforms. Sometimes performance isn't always about frame rates and resolutions.
To Jurassic Park.
There's this age-old thought process by many that the bulk of Nintendo fans, or just by many gamers in general, don't like great-looking games with amazing visuals. Let me tell you something. Ever since I started playing games from the early computer days, how games continue to look and evolve was always at the forefront of our minds. There is simply no way on Chrom's Earth that we didn't get excited about how great new Mario games looked across the same console and then progressing into console generations, straight from the original arcade Mario through to Mario 1, 2, 3, Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, of course, Sunshine, and on and on. We all hunger to see our favorite games look better and better, or just games in general. The greatest difference for me has always been, and always probably continue to be, is at what point do we feel that regardless of the era we're in, at what point do games in general just look and play great? I've spoken many times in the past of where I feel games hit that they hit that sweet visual spot, or of where games in general just looked and played great, and any progression after this is just natural evolution for what is arguably the most ever-changing and diverse medium humanity has created. If I go back to the Dreamcast, the PS2, the GameCube, and Xbox era, one of my favorite eras, and fired up games like Soul Calibur on the Sega Dreamcast, Zone of the Enders on the PS2, F-Zero GX on the GameCube, and Panzer Dragoon Orta on the original Xbox. I hate calling it original Xbox, just on the Xbox. Just as quick examples. In my mind, in what world and on what planet could anyone consider these games to look bad in any meaningful or fundamental way? Even today, it just staggers my mind. Of course, we all love things now in a certain resolution to take full advantage of our modern displays. But as gamers, as gaming, in my mind, there always has to be a level of acceptance that the vast majority of games cannot look 100% pixel or polygon perfect and at the highest fidelity with the highest resolution and consistently high level of detail, which virtually no developer or no game on the planet has ever or will ever achieve, most likely. We have to remember that we are playing video games. There will always be something that isn't perfect, and I say perfect with quotations. There's no such thing as perfection, unless we're talking about Panzer Dragoon Saga. So people now are seemingly getting tired with how the Nintendo Switch games look and perform. I think in part, in reality, for people, especially my age, there is a constant yearning to see peak graphical Nintendo before we die. We're not getting any younger. I'm sure we'd all love to see a Legend of Zelda game look like Moana from Disney, or Mario, or the Mario game look like the recent Mario movie trailers that that would all or most of us are super happy with. But I also feel in part that for many Nintendo fans, or even gamers who pretend not to be Nintendo fans, it's also linked to knowing that Nintendo make many of the best games in the industry, and seeing arguably themselves or their partners somewhat limited by Nintendo hardware when compared to what modern platforms can offer. I say modern platforms. The Switch, is still theoretically a modern platform, but obviously talking about the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, what they can offer. So we all just wonder what Nintendo could do visually, with Mario and Zelda, etc. When we look at games like Ratchet and Clank, on the PlayStation 5 or Horizon, as just quick examples. But you know what? Nintendo still proved time and time again that not only can they make their games look great, but they can do things on older hardware that the other developers couldn't even bother to do with their modern platforms, or even on the older platforms. And as a Nintendo player, I look at games like Breath of the Wild and or Mario Odyssey and think, shit, these IPs have never looked better. And I can't get enough of them. Even playing them now, years down the road, I'm just like, man, these games just look great. I personally have so many great games to still play on the Switch that the thought of a new Nintendo console coming out next year is something that I currently have no interest in right now. Purely because I have these great looking games to play now. Whilst also knowing that we're getting a new Zelda, a new Pikmin, a new Fire Emblem, and hopefully a new Metroid Prime. It's not that if these games came out on the new Nintendo hardware, I'd be excited for them, especially if they looked even better. Of course, like I said, we all love great graphics, but right now I'm excited now by how they look from what we've seen. I just think they look great, and based off the first 3 games that I just mentioned, I simply can't look at these and think they look graphically weak in any meaningful way, or even desire them to look even better right now, because I know I'm playing on a Switch, and like I said, to me they just look fantastic. Art design, is a major factor, of course, and I hate it. I hate it when this is used as a negative these days, especially towards Nintendo games. How can anyone moan about a great looking art style because it might hide some of the game's more technical limitations in terms of pushing hard polygons, so that Link's sword is even more detailed for the first, for the 1% of people who pay attention to those kind of things. In the past, I spoke about pushing a console to its max, not just graphically but game design wise as well. From my personal experience of living through all these gaming generations, after the Nintendo 64, in my opinion, not a single home console released since has been truly pushed to the max. Either graphically or game design wise. I've not experienced a single console since the N64 that feels like it's maxed out, bellowing smoke and creaking at the seams. You want to see creaking at the seams, then play the Skida ship level in Perfect Dark on the N64. Now I'm not saying that we should today accept games or expect games to reach such a level of poor performance that it might be considered truly unplayable at times. But the point I've always made is that the vast majority of developers aren't given the time or even have the development skills to truly max out a console's potential, especially with today's consoles. And you saw that with the N64. The last ones to really push the N64 was Rare, with like Conkers and Perfect Dark, and some other games. We go through countless generations saying, I wonder what a Mario 64 2 would have looked like on the N64, based off how great Rare made Banjo-Kazooie look. I wonder what else Factor 5 could have produced on the GameCube, considering that they got Star Wars Rebel Strike to run in co-op with virtually no compromises to the graphics or hardly anything to the frame rate, compared to what the single player could do. I wonder what a Wind Waker sequel would look like on the Wii U. Considering that the HD version of the GameCube title with some added bloom lighting, left all our jaws on the floor. Just imagine a brand new adventure with that art style, but also with the power of the Wii U. Come on, people. Yet here we are craving new hardware instead of craving new great games, when it's clear that the potential is still left in many ways for those talented developers, the ones we do know who make the efforts, and we're continuing to see that. And speaking of the Wii U, do you feel Nintendo had enough time with that machine to achieve their visions of their IP library into HD for the first time? I think how quickly some software appeared on the Switch in its first year, I would say that actually proves it. That they didn't have enough time. Breath of the Wild on the Wii U being stripped of ideas clearly demonstrated that Nintendo had a lot more up their sleeves for that original version, which still turned out to be the greatest game ever made on the Switch, and that's a collective fact. If Nintendo said that the Switch will continue, right, for another 2 years, and in that time we got a Mario Odyssey 2, we got a Luigi's Mansion 4, an ARMS 2, which a lot of people are begging for, like myself. A new 3D Donkey Kong game we're all begging for, along with the already announced new Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, etc. I just can't see how in any gamer's minds that this wouldn't be great or exciting, or how they consider those games based on previous entries on the Switch to look bad in any way, or even tired. Because even then, this isn't like a new Assassin's Creed pumped out every year. Between the Wii U and the Switch, we've only really had, as an example, two focused 3D Mario games. And no, I don't count Bowser's Fury as a full game, even though it's still a substantial chunk of a Mario DLC. And even then, Super Mario 3D World and Mario Odyssey both look and play completely different. Are you telling me that you couldn't accept another great looking 3D Mario game, looking just like or even slightly better than Odyssey? When did we decide that in a single generation, multiple entries of games looking fundamentally the same way was a bad thing? What's only ever been the issue for me is if those new entries don't fundamentally go beyond the previous game in any meaningful way that feels worthwhile. Because that's when repetition can kick in. Especially if those games are released on somewhat an annual basis. The Donkey Kong trilogy on the SNES perhaps hit that issue. Seems like the Gears of War games on the 360. Just throwing out some examples there. I guess for many people they feel that more through graphics or visuals. And then here's me utterly, falling in love with games like Octopath Traveler or Triangle Strategy, and then wanting virtually every classic SNES RPG to be remade in that exact visual style, while still getting new games in this style, like Octopath Traveler 2 and the Dragon Quest 4 remake. I think it's a remake of Dragon Quest 4. I can't remember. I've heard people saying that that they're already getting bored, with this look already. Just after a few game releases, and I just don't get it. Perhaps they were just never truly impressed or interested with it to begin with, because all these games are still offering brand new adventures. We've only had one Octopath Traveler. It's all right to have a sequel, that looks graphically similar and get a brand new adventure, and then maybe afterwards then we might get one more. You might start feeling it a little, but God, the art style got so much potential. I don't know. To call the Switch to call for the Switch to move on at this moment in time for me personally is questionable. Considering its continued sales, its record-breaking software sales, and its up-and-coming release schedule. From an industry point of view, I understand the desire for Nintendo to be up there with the others, or the personal fear that Nintendo will lose momentum like they did with the Wii. And it's better to move on whilst you're on a high with a somewhat slow visible decline in some areas, but those areas are right now with the hardware and software. You can't shift 500,000 units in a week in Japan and or something and call it slowing down. It's but for those hunting for that Switch 2 because of graphics and performance, even a much desired Switch Pro wouldn't get anywhere near what the PS5 or Series X has to offer. If we're being honest, and if it's the modern Nintendo that we know, I think even getting close to the Steam Deck or even the Xbox Series S for the new Switch Hybrid 2, would be a bit of a reach. Although reaching this benchmark is a more plausible scenario, and I do wonder if people would be happy with that. You don't hear you hear complaints about the Series X, say holding back the Series X. You don't hear as many complaints with the Steam Deck because it's even though it's running games to a lower resolution and stuff, it's pushing a bit more, right? And people who own it seem more happy with that. Basically, if you want PS5 Nintendo, then don't ask for the Switch 2. And re-embrace the Nintendo model of old, of having two platforms on the market. Because with a hybrid model, you can't have your much desired Nintendo peak graphical cake and eat it, I'm afraid. People want their third-party Switch games to be up to par with other platforms. For many games, you just can't. It's a Nintendo Switch, people. And once again, if the Switch 2 came along, still a hybrid. Many third-party, graphically intense games still won't be graphically up to par, with the other consoles. it's just not possible. And remember, it's not why you should be buying into the hybrid system in the first place. You know, and we've seen time again, you know, what third parties can be like with the Nintendo Switch. You know, some make the effort, and we get, you know, something like Nier Automata. You know, some don't make the effort, and we get a cloud version of Resident Evil 2 remake. You know, do you seriously feel that the Switch could have run a competent version of Resident Evil 2 remake? Is this game doing so much new, or so much advanced that it's simply beyond anything the Switch could do? You know, even though it released on the 900p powerhouse that was the original Xbox One. Yeah, come on, people. You know, the reality is that many people, I feel, just never accepted the Switch for what it was from the start, and it's just bugged them ever since. There will always be scenarios where we desire something beyond what is given. I just got off completing the greatness and pure joy that was Bayonetta 3, you know, a series that in many ways had a trilogy of games over a decade on somewhat similar capable hardware. You can see where the Switch has been able to take concepts of Bayonetta to another crazy level, you know, arguably on better technical level than what previous hardware to the series graced. That the series graced, you know, might have been able to produce, but at the same time, I feel like I confidently say that Platinum Games have, you know, pretty much maxed out what they can or would like to do with a Bayonetta 4 on this level of hardware, on the Switch level of hardware. So even they will, you know, need some greater levels of technical performance to allow the Umber Witch to continue to push the boundaries of action games, where Bayonetta 3 has already, you know, done things that no other developer has, you know, allowed us to play in this medium. It's, you know, the gameplay is still there, and is still, you know, breaking down walls, breaking down boundaries, and putting to shame, you know, the other big, you know, action third person games out there. You know, so in this example, you know, for Bayonetta, yes, you know, I agree, Platinum now needs to go beyond what they have currently been doing in order to continue to push the series. You know, in that time, you know, I'd still happily take the rumored, you know, Jean or Rodin spin-off games on my Nintendo Switch, or even more, you know, an Astral Chain 2, you know, which once again looks and plays fantastic on a Switch. How about a Mad World 2 or the wonderful 102? You know, the list goes on whilst they work on Bayonetta 4 for future hardware, perhaps. And I'll say the same thing for Monolith Soft, you know, at least in terms of the Xenoblade series, you know, which has seen Xenoblade X, Xenoblade 2 and 3 all on somewhat similar hardware. You know, it's not that a Xenoblade 4 with altogether new geometry and worlds for us to explore on Switch hardware would be a bad thing. You know, once again, after the greatness, the pure epicness of Xenoblade 3, a game I absolutely loved, you know, I would snap up a Xenoblade 4 on the Switch in a heartbeat. But it's clearly, technically, that there isn't much more they can do with a similar setup. You know, so yes, perhaps for the next Xenoblade, new hardware is required to really push it past what once was. Yeah, for that studio, for at least for Xenoblade, yeah, I feel like, you know, yeah, Monolith are at that level now where they're just like, yeah, let's go to the next hardware and let's blow our brains away even more. You know, but for me, does Xenoblade 3 look bad in any meaningful way? Man, you know, come on, get out of town now, man. Xenoblade 3 is beautiful. You know, people will nitpick some parts as always. You know, but trust me, you know, you could do that with most games. Listen, we all love better graphics and smooth running games, you know, especially if our most favorite and talented developers are at the helm. You know, but has the Switch peaked in terms of what it can offer both visually and game design wise? For some studios, yeah, I feel like they can't go much further. But a vast majority of studios and the amount of games that they have managed to release in this generation, no. You know, I don't believe, you know, that at all. And that continues to be proved with each great software release, you know, with the right developers in control. And you see this. But you see Pokemon Violet, you see this is all Game Freak, you know, not the Switch, and we've seen plenty of comparisons between Xenoblade and Pokemon Violet and your Scarlet. You know, there's even you know, the developers like Game Freak, who I always chew out because they have the biggest IP on the planet. They should be doing more. should be doing more. You know, and just to reiterate, you know, it's not that I wouldn't want a new shiny Nintendo console. It's just that based off what the Switch currently has and is still getting, I'm sitting all gravy here with a software lineup of great games that keep on giving. And there's always the argument: could new Nintendo hardware create gaming experiences that we just simply can't have now? Yes, of course. That's why we like to see hardware move on. But like I said, what they're doing now, what we've seen, and even want to see more of, like I said, like a Super Mario Galaxy 2, there's just so many ideas in that game that could just be put into a sequel. Yeah, I'd take it, and I'd take Mario Odyssey 2, and I would love it, every single inch of it, both visually and gameplay wise. It's just I just cannot see me not loving it. You know, so yeah. Yeah, that was a long video. I certainly a little rantish. You know, it's sometimes you just get passionate about these things, you just start spinning it out. But but please let me know your thoughts on how you feel about the Switch graphically, gameplay wise and performance wise after all these years in, and if you feel the big urge for Nintendo to move on. Or can you like me still sit here for a few years more? I'm not talking 5 years down the road or whatever. I do feel them well by then that the Switch would have been maxed out. These 2 more years of just playing great games that are still releasing for the platform. And everyone's going to be different. Like I said, this has been a eye-opening generation on what people look for just generally in games and hardware. But yeah, as always, I appreciate your time. If you stuck to the end, thank you very much. And as always, I'll reply to every single one of you. Take care all, and peace.